Hey all, how's it going? I hope you're doing well and having a good and fun time. I started a new series of paintings that are kind of like a conglomeration of different patterns and like op art that I've been collecting on Pinterest. So I painted 2 in this video and I plan to do several more and then kind of sew them all together in like a painted quilt, essentially. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing them and I'm excited to show you guys how they turned out. So let's get into it. So I started this off with some pencil lines that were 1/2 inch distance from one another, just to help me like stick to my guidelines. I had a drawing that I did in my sketchbook. You can see it on the right side of the screen there that I'm working from. But I didn't want to be like too strict about it. I really wanted the fact that it's hand painted to come through, and if I were like too much of a perfectionist, then that might be lost. This painting took about 4 hours, so I was able to finish it in one day. The second one that I did was a lot more involved, so it took like 6 to 8 hours. I'm not really sure, I lost count. Suffice to say, my hand was cramping by the end of it, but these are really fun for me to do, just because I can like go into the studio and do some sketches of patterns and then just start it, and really the only preparation it requires is me drawing out whatever grid I need as a guideline and then mixing the colors. But while I'm actually painting it, I don't have to do a lot of planning or thinking, and sometimes that's the kind of work that I need. It is very difficult for me sometimes to go into the studio and like draw or paint, mostly because it's such an active process, and because because I have depression, it's like really hard for me to think actively sometimes. You know, I just want to be like a zombie and deaden my thoughts, but it's hard to do that and simultaneously make complex abstract drawings where you're having to think through every gesture that you make. So with these paintings, I can really turn my brain off, or like go off on some random chain of thought and really get lost in whatever I'm working on. So yeah, this is, I think, an attempt for me to continue building a studio practice that works around my mental illness rather than working against it. You know, like I gotta plan to do the type of work on days where I don't feel like doing work, that's easy to do. And these paintings are easy to do, and I think end up really visually interesting at the same time. Plus, it's a really good opportunity for me to reflect on colors and how they interact with one another, what kind of palettes I want to work with, all of that. This project was started because I was so frustrated by the limited selection of fabrics. I don't have a lot to choose from in my studio. Even though I have collected a lot of material, it still feels limited to me. Plus, all of the fabric that I source is from the thrift store. I, for ethical reasons, don't really buy fabric brand new from Joann or other similar fabric shops, just because I'm not entirely familiar with fabric production processes. Like, I know that fast fashion is, pretty unethical and puts a lot of strain on the environment and creates a lot of material waste, and so I try not to participate in that when I can, but I'm not as familiar with the environmental impact that like actual fabric production has. So yeah, this is just an effort for me to design my own patterns while also thinking about like what it means to paint a pattern versus screen printing one or printing one off of a digital drawing. Like, there are so many ways to produce a pattern, And this, I feel like, is the most time-consuming and labor-intensive way to do it. And yeah, I think that has a lot of really interesting implications. So I like this painting because it reminds me of, for some reason I'm thinking of like Windows Media Player, Winamp. It would have like the equalizer, you know, with the little bars that would measure sound. These remind me of those little equalizer bars. So it's kind of nostalgic in that way. But it's essentially just like a stretched out checkerboard with alternating orange and yellow blocks. So this one that I'm starting now, like I said earlier, was a lot more complicated and took a lot more time, but I think ultimately it made for a more interesting pattern because of that. I've got like a 1-inch grid here, so still doing the pencil drawing underneath, and then I go in each block and add a 1-inch circle within the square. And then I divide those circles in half with 1/2-inch lines. I like the pencil drawing showing through. I was kind of thinking about Agnes Martin and her work while I was making these. She did these, she's known for these grid paintings that almost all of them you can see the pencil underdrawing, and she kind of does patterning like these paintings that I'm doing here, but hers are much more simple. They're usually in these sort of like soft pastel hues, and they're really beautiful, calm paintings. But Agnes Martin is also interesting to me because she was mentally ill and, left the art world to a certain extent. I mean, still showed her work in New York and other major cultural centers while she was alive, but lived in the desert for most of her life, just working alone on these really rhythmic, beautiful grid paintings. That's the original sketch that I'm referencing, by the way, so it ends up looking somewhat like that. Yeah, so she lived alone for most of her life, and the older I get, the more I understand, like, leaving the art world and living in isolation. But also I understand why she was so connected to that particular image, because of its, like, I think these paintings are similar in technique, rely heavily on repetition, and I think that that's a really, like I said before, a really suitable way to work when you have mental illness. So yeah, I feel a little bit more connected to her work after making these, and letting the pencil underdrawing show through is kind of like a nod to her. But yeah, I started off this one just doing a wash all over in orange, and then I did a layer of red and then more of the orange. The palette that I was using had some previous like purple that I had mixed on there, and the dried up acrylic got mixed into my paint. And so that's what those dark blurs are on the canvas. I ended up accidentally transferring some of those like paint skins onto the canvas, and then I tried to rub them out and ended up getting those smears, which at the time I was like, this is gonna look so bad, but it actually added a really interesting variation to the print that wouldn't have otherwise been there. So you get some like value shifts in the background while this really regular pattern is happening in the foreground. I wanted to finish this all in one day. My main goal here is to be able to knock one of these out a day, but my hand was cramping so bad that I finished like half of it and then started to proceed further, and my hand was just cramping too much, so I had to stretch this out into 2 days. But yeah, I'm excited about this process and excited to continue making them. I have a lot of patterns lined up that I want to paint. I'm also wanting to reference patterns that I've been collecting from paintings that are important to art history. So there's like this one Matisse painting that has this lady lounging in a tiled bathroom, and the tile is blue tile with white grout, and I kind of want to paint that just as a pattern. So I want to make some art historical references with the patterns as well. But the two that I made in this video are mostly just like kind of referencing op art and geometry. It's an exciting direction for my work to go in, because I think sometimes when I'm doing the abstract drawings and paintings, I'm just like not planning them out to begin with, and so there's not a lot of intention there. They do end up being expressive and kind of a release of my mental state, whatever it happens to be at the time. But there's just not a lot of intention. There's not a lot of concept behind them. And sometimes I beat myself up for that, and I sort of, I'm on the fence as to whether it's just necessary for me to engage in that psychological process so I can come to other conclusions and make new works like these, or if I should just not engage in it at all. I'm kind of surprised that my work continues to go in this direction of labor intensive pieces and pieces that require precision and repetition, because that's never been something I'm inclined toward. I'm such an impatient person and don't like repetitive tasks. Something else that I'm interested in relation to these pattern paintings is the connections between art and decor. So like a fabric pattern would traditionally be used to make curtains with, or upholster a couch, or make pillows. And because of that, they're not really seen as fine art. Because there has been for such a long time this sort of categorization of design objects as separate from art. But I don't think that because something is functional that it has any less aesthetic value. If anything, it has more, because it's something that you're living with. And so in the same way, paintings can kind of fall into that category, right? Like, paintings can become decor for people. And I think a lot of painters are scared of that, and they don't want their work to be decorative, or they don't want their work to just be made to go over a couch. They want some higher function, like to exist in a museum or in these public spaces where no one actually lives their lives. But the places where we live our lives are the spaces that mean the most to us. So I guess I'm trying to drag the idea that painting shouldn't be decor through the mud. And so to make paintings that are referencing textiles that would be used in the home, and these paintings are intended to be in people's homes, I feel like that's really, it's a way for me to kind of swear off making paintings for these higher echelons of people who use art as a tool for accumulating wealth, because I'm like very against that and don't really want to participate in it. And so I guess this is my way of rebelling a little bit. I don't know. I don't want my work to become a product, but I do want my work to be accessible to people conceptually, something that they can relate to. And it's hard to find that in abstraction because most people want the figure. They want a body they can reference and a face they can find. Like, they want to see themselves in the work, so it's harder to do that with abstraction. But a kind of abstraction that does make sense to people is patterning, because it's everywhere, you know what I mean? Like, you go on Instagram and there are all of these shop pages that like make their living off of having interesting checkerboard patterned underwear like, because that pattern is trending right now and people want checkered everything. So it's kind of like a participation in aesthetics that's accessible to people, and abstraction that is accessible to people. Yeah, I'm really happy with this, how this came out. I'm glad all of those dark smears happened in the background, and I think the choice for me to have the lilac shapes filled in with kind of a streaky brushstroke added a lot of interesting visual texture. So I'm excited to continue making these and see where it goes. I worry that I'm going to continue to get more attached to each painting that I make, and it's going to become hard for me to like cut them up and make them into a quilt. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a good week, and I will see you next time. Bye.